Chapter 13. Travelling through space wasn't at all how Jeremy had imagined it would be. To start with, they didn't all get into special lying-down seats and have their faces pulled out of shape. In fact, the TARDIS didn't seem to be moving at all, and though the Doctor and the Brigadier kept up a desultory conversation about wormholes through space-time and stuff, wormholes, it was difficult to tell exactly how long the trip took. It was sort of the same as getting really interested in something, like that time he had got caught up watching a slug crossing the path in the kitchen garden, and was late for tea, and Nanny got so cross. Yet in the TARDIS there was nothing going on to be interested in. But in no time at all, or was it an hour or more, the noise came to an abrupt and noisy end. The Doctor was bending over the dials, checking them, and seemed to be in no hurry to leave. Jeremy wondered what happened next. "Are we there?" he asked. "Oxygen 18%. It would appear so," the Doctor answered, looking up. "On the other side of that door, according to Mr. Freeth, we shall find a paradise called Paracon. Of course, it rather depends on your definition of paradise. Ready, Brigadier?" "Ready, Doctor. Then here goes." Jeremy could feel his heart thumping as he followed the others outside. But what awaited them was a sad disappointment. As they walked away from the TARDIS, it was difficult to see very much at all for the thick, oily mist that swirled about. There was half a collapsed wall nearby, and the glutinous mud beneath their feet. A dull rumbling was interrupted by the sound of a distant explosion. Almost immediately, the unmistakable swoosh of an approaching missile or shell filled their ears. "Get down!" cried the Brigadier. Jeremy flung himself to the ground. A noise so loud that it became the whole of the world flung bricks and mud over his head. Dimly he heard the Doctor's voice. "Everybody all right?" Tentatively pushing himself into a sitting position, he'd got a mouthful of the disgusting mud. Jeremy checked. Nothing seemed to hurt. As his hearing recovered, Jeremy could pick out other warlike noises from the general rumble of faraway guns. There was a machine gun somewhere in the neighbourhood, and more explosions, though none so near as the first. "Over here!" called the Brigadier, and in a crouching scramble through the rubble and the mud, Jeremy joined him in the inadequate shelter of the ruined wall, now half its former size. As he reached the wall, his foot turned on a lump of brick, and he stumbled forward onto his hands, onto a softness and a wetness that, oh God! He'd landed on a body, lying face down in the mud. The dead man had been torn apart by an earlier explosion. Jeremy recoiled in shock and fell at the feet of the Brigadier. "Hold on, lad," the Brigadier said, picking him up. "Better get back to the TARDIS, Doctor," he shouted. But the Doctor, walking forward, apparently oblivious of any danger, peering through the murk in the direction of the sounds of fighting, seemed not hear him. "Keep your heads down! You want to get killed!" A rasping voice preceded the appearance of a mud-covered figure, heaving himself along on his elbows, the better to keep a gun which looked like a short, thick rifle off the ground. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" His leathery face was the colour of the mud beneath him, and his totally bald pate was streaked with blood. As he raised his gun and aimed it at the Doctor, another scattered broadside of shells landed close ahead. "Is this Paracon?" said the Doctor. He had to shout to be heard over the renewed attack. "What?" The Doctor moved over and squatted by the man. "This planet. What is its name?" He lowered his gun. "Just landed, have you?" he said. "No, this isn't Paracon. May it be cast into the everlasting pit of serpents. This is Blestinu." Blestinu? So the TARDIS had brought them to the wrong place? A line of explosions detonated behind them, the last one splattering them with mud. "They've got us bracketed, Doctor," shouted the Brigadier. "We'd better get out of here." "If you've got somewhere to go, then go," the soldier said in his croaking voice, and heaving himself to his feet, He ran slantways into the fog, gun at the ready, with the lumbering gait of exhaustion. The Brigadier didn't wait any longer. Disdaining to crouch, he ran to the TARDIS, which Jeremy could only just see. Just to think if they'd lost it in the fog, with Jeremy coming after him just as quickly as he could squelch through the mud. The Doctor arrived at the door at about the same time as the Brigadier. "Come on, boy," he called as Jeremy sank his left foot deep into a mud puddle of a more than usually viscous nature. "I'm stuck," he squeaked as he tried in vain to pull it out. What the Brigadier said remained private, as an even nearer explosion quite drowned it. Nevertheless, he ran back to Jeremy and with a strong pull yanked him free. "My shoe! I've lost my shoe!" "Come on!" cried the Brigadier, and hauled him hobbledy-skip across the mud to the TARDIS. The post-mortem started as soon as they were safely inside and the door closed. "How could the TARDIS make a mistake like that? Is that circuit still broken?" the Brigadier asked rather testily. "The TARDIS didn't make a mistake," said the Doctor. "I did. I foolishly made the assumption that the hair in the psychotelemeter came from a creature that is a native of Paracon." "Ah, I see," said the Brigadier. "The psychotelemeter guided the TARDIS to the place of origin of the hair," explained the Doctor, "just as it was intended to do, in fact. But the creature came from Blestinu, not Paracon." "So, what are we waiting for?" said the Brigadier. "What do you mean?" said the Doctor. "Well, now we know, we'd better get a move on." "And how do you propose to do that?" said the Doctor. "We are in the right sector of the galaxy, certainly, but there must be several thousand possible planets to choose from. You like a flutter on the horses, it seems. If there were 2,000 or 3,000 runners, you wouldn't risk a halfpenny on the favourite, let alone an outsider. And we'd be gambling with Sarah Jane's life." Tragan seemed to lose interest in Sarah once he had shown her his real appearance. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, becoming quite still. It was almost as if he were meditating. The pause gave Sarah the time to gather her shattered defences. After all, she thought, it didn't really matter what he looked like, though she couldn't stop herself from shuddering when she tried to look at him with an objective eye. It was sheer prejudice to judge people by their appearance. "Never mind his looks," shrieked another voice in her head. "It's what he's going to do to you. What he's going to do." She closed her eyes and took a few deep breaths. He hadn't really done anything yet, apart from tying her up. Maybe it had all been just talk. Maybe he was just trying to frighten her. She opened her eyes and realized with a shock, like touching a live terminal, that his eyes were open and he was staring at her with his colourless, heavy-lidded eyes. That was another thing she realized. He never blinked. "Okay, mate," she thought, "you're trying to frighten me, and you're succeeding, but I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of knowing it, okay?" Realizing that an attempt to stare him out could only end with her as the loser, she closed her eyes again and did her best to forget her surroundings. At once, her mind filled with the events that had brought her to this pass, and her heart sank anew. The Doctor was dead. The sound of the pilot's voice on the intercom interrupted her thoughts. "Vice-Chairman?" "Ready when you are, Krustin," Tragan replied, a slight ripple passing over his face. "More than ready. Eager." "No, I've got Chairman Freeth for you." "Oh, you'd better put him through, then." She felt an irrational hope. Surely his boss, even if he were a crook, surely he wouldn't let Tragan, wouldn't allow him to... Sarah's mind refused to go on. But Tragan had continued. "Oh, and Crestin, don't tell him about our guest." "I already have. Sorry, sir." Tragan's fluid face trembled like a badly made blancmange, but whether in fury or disappointment, it was impossible to guess. Never mind. Put him on. No, wait. Ask him to hold. He's very impatient to speak to you, sir. It seems he's been trying to get through ever since we passed the asteroid belt. I shan't keep him a moment, replied Tragan. I must apologize for cutting you short so impolitely, he said, as he muffled Sarah's protests. The taste of the cloth in her mouth was alien and nauseating. I'm sure you understand the necessity, he went on. Right, Crestin, let us discover what our esteemed chairman wants. Freeth's concern became apparent very quickly. He already knew that Sarah was with Tragan. Let me speak to her, he said. Tragan paused briefly and then said, I'm afraid she's a little tied up at the moment. Sarah tried to shout through the thick folds of the gagging cloth, but if Freeth heard the muffled sounds, he preferred to ignore them. Up to your old tricks, are you? He said. Well, I'm sorry to spoil your fun, but I've had a call from the Brigadier. He claims to know that you have Miss Smith on board. Oh, dear old Jeremy, well done. I denied all knowledge of you and your disgusting doings, of course. But since we are the goodies at the moment, it might be as well if she were to remain intact, so to speak. She's seen one of the guards, said Tragan in his flattest voice. I see. Pity. Very well. Keep her incommunicado, but safe. She's more useful to us alive and well. You understand me? But of course you do. Tragan started to protest. At once, Freeth's voice hardened. No argument, no discussion. You will do as I say. The situation has changed now that we know the doctor is still alive. What? Not dead? But that was impossible. You said yourself that we should be safe provided I removed the guards, said Tragan. I've had a long talk with the doctor. He is even more dangerous than I thought. We must tread very carefully. Oh, blessed be. The world was in step again. Even her sinister prison with its dark walls and black furniture had changed its dull threat to a brightness of aspect that almost sparkled. Now Tragan was wheedling, trying to make Freeth change his mind about Sarah. After all, Chairman, he was saying, they've no way of following us to Paracon. They'll have to believe whatever tale we choose to tell. You're greedy, Tragan. You know that. I do. I am. Don't worry, said Freeth in a kindly voice. Once the hue and cry has died down, you can have her back. You can play even better games with her at home now, can't you? I might even join you. We could have one of our special parties, with Miss Smith as our star guest. Now, wouldn't that be fun? The intercom switched off. Removing the gag, Tragan sat down opposite her once more and stared at her as he had earlier. The movement of his face under the skin was like the slow rolling swell of the ocean after a storm. This time, Sarah stared back at him. Forcing herself to speak coolly, she asked if there were now any reason to keep her tied up. A safety precaution, he answered. His answer was a lie. She was convinced of that. Her discomfort and the demonstration of his power over her were a small compensation for losing his little games. He'd have to untie her when they arrived on Paracon, after all. I presume that we shan't be landing at your equivalent of Heathrow, she said. I have my own facilities in my own backyard, I think you could call it. Fortress Tragan, with a nice selection of hungry beasties roaming the grounds? One might almost think you'd been there, he said, and licked his thin lips. All at once, Sarah was filled with anger, that this creature should dare to treat her so. I'll tell you this, she said, filled with the righteous courage that rage bestows. I nearly lost my bottle back there, I freely admit. Your bottle? It doesn't matter. What does matter is that the doctor is still alive. I don't know what your game is, but you're evil through and through, and I give you my word that I'll go on fighting you to the end, whatever that might be. Tragan sighed a deep sigh of satisfaction. His face had come alive. Bumps of fluid-filled skin appeared and disappeared, bubbling like a saucepan of boiling porridge. Ah, he said, the brave ones are always so much more rewarding when at last they break. The extremity of their fear resonates like the shriek of 1,000 out-of-tune violins. Oh, how can I bear to wait?